Every storybook tells you that princesses lived charmed lives. But what the books never reveal is that French princesses endured sexual rituals designed to strip them of dignity. Their first nights of marriage were not private celebrations but state performances. Their virginity was inspected, recorded, and sold like property. These truths were buried because they were too scandalous to survive in the official history of France. But the evidence remains hidden in letters and diaries, and now, it's time to uncover it. The body of a French princess was never really her own. From the moment she was born, it was treated as political property, a tool to secure alliances, peace treaties, and dynastic power. Her virginity was not just personal, it was state business. And the proof of that purity had to be inspected. Before marriage, princesses were often subjected to humiliating virginity inspections, sometimes by physicians, sometimes by older women of the court. Imagine being a teenager, stripped of privacy, forced to prove your innocence to strangers, and then having the results whispered through the palace halls. This wasn't about health or concern. It was about value. A princess's worth was calculated on whether her body could be sold as a pure commodity. The marriages themselves were arranged at ages that today feel unthinkable, 12, 13, or sometimes 14. These were not fairy tale romances. They were contracts. A girl barely out of childhood could be handed to a man decades older, her wedding night treated as a political event, her most private moment turned into a public guarantee of alliance. This is the side of royal weddings you'll never see in the paintings or the history books. Behind the flowers and jewels, a French princess's body was currency, bought, inspected, and traded in the name of power. If you think marriage gave French princesses even a moment of privacy, think again. The wedding night, the most intimate moment of a woman's life, was turned into a political performance. In some cases, officials or trusted witnesses waited outside the royal bedchamber, listening for signs that the marriage had been completed. And when the act was finished, there had to be proof. The evidence? Bloodied sheets. They were displayed the next morning like trophies, shown to courtiers, ambassadors, even entire households as political proof that the princess was pure and the marriage valid. Her body became a stage and her pain a guarantee. But what if there was no blood? That was dangerous. A missing stain could spark whispers of scandal. Accusations of infertility, questions of loyalty, even demands for annulment or exile. A single night could decide the fate of a princess, whether she remained a queen or was discarded in disgrace. Sexual privacy didn't exist for these women. Their most personal experiences were turned into public evidence, their bodies judged not by love or choice but by politics. Behind the silks and jewels, every wedding night was a test, one that a princess could not afford to fail. For French princesses, even their most private parts were never private. Their bodies were treated like machines owned by the state, and if those machines didn't produce heirs fast enough, royal doctors stepped in. Palace physicians and midwives intruded into the most intimate corners of a princess's life. They monitored her cycles, examined her body, and reported her fertility to the king as if she were livestock. If she failed to conceive quickly, the blame was never on her husband. It always fell on the woman. And the treatments they forced on her ranged from bizarre to brutal. Aphrodisiacs made from ground-up animal organs, potions mixed with wine and herbs, ritual diets designed to warm the womb. Princesses were forced to swallow strange remedies day after day. Some were even bled or subjected to invasive procedures that only worsened their health. None of it was about her well-being. It was about producing the next heir at any cost. In the eyes of the court, a princess wasn't a wife or even a person. She was a vessel, a womb wrapped in silk, and every doctor, priest, and politician had a say in how her body was managed. Her reproductive organs were state property, and her suffering was considered part of her duty. The French crown sold itself to the world as the height of purity, elegance, and divine order. But behind the polished image, rumors swirled through the courts, whispers of incest and scandal that suggested power mattered more than morality. To preserve dynastic bloodlines, marriages between close relatives were often arranged. Cousins were paired, sometimes uncomfortably close cousins, and gossip went further. Court chronicles hinted that some princesses were pressured into intimacy with uncles, brothers-in-law, even fathers-in-law. Whether these rumors were fact or exaggeration hardly mattered. They revealed how little choice a princess had in her own body. Even the possibility of incest was seen as an acceptable sacrifice if it served the dynasty. In a world where bloodlines meant power, a princess's sexuality could be twisted into a weapon. Her supposed purity could be questioned, her loyalty doubted, her name ruined by rumors alone. Even if the stories weren't true, they spread like wildfire through Europe's courts, used as political ammunition. The fairy tale princess was supposed to symbolize innocence. But in reality her reputation was constantly stalked by scandal, and sometimes by the very family that was meant to protect her. If French princesses lived under suffocating control, the fate of countless other women across Europe and beyond was far worse. Because while royal marriages were paraded as glamorous, a hidden industry turned young women into nothing more than sexual merchandise. The Crimean slave port of Kaffa was one of the darkest centers of this trade. Every year nearly 20,000 women passed through its markets, stripped, inspected, and priced by age and ethnicity. Slavic girls fetched high prices, Circassians were treated as the gold standard, while African women were valued the least. There were actual ledgers that read like menus of misery, age, beauty, health, all reduced to numbers on a page. Most of these women were funneled into palace harems. Forget the romanticized images of silk cushions and jeweled chambers. The reality was bureaucratic rape. We have records, stamped with official seals, literally documenting the purchase of teenage girls for royal harems. The paperwork is as cold as any modern receipt. Received 12 Circassian girls ages 13 to 16, intact and in good health. The horrors inside these harems are difficult to even describe. Suicide was common. Rivalries turned into murder. Pregnancies were dangerous. Some children were killed outright, others forced into slavery from birth. Unwanted pregnancies ended in forced abortions that often left women broken or dead. Families were so desperate to save their daughters from this fate that some Circassian parents scarred their girls' faces on purpose, believing that an ugly daughter was safer than a beautiful one. Imagine the cruelty of a world where mutilation by your own parents was considered an act of love. Historians estimate that across centuries, between 10 and 15 million women were enslaved for sexual purposes in these systems. And unlike Atlantic slavery, which left behind millions of descendants, this nightmare left almost none. Their children were killed, absorbed, or erased. Whole generations of women disappeared into silence. No communities, no memorials, no one left to even carry their names. If these practices were so widespread, so well documented, then why don't we learn about them? Why are they absent from classrooms, history books, and documentaries? The answer is simple. Silence wasn't an accident, it was policy. Academics barely touch this subject. You can find hundreds of university courses and books about Atlantic slavery, and you should, but when it comes to Islamic slavery or the sexual trade of women, you'll find almost nothing. Entire careers have been destroyed for even trying to research it. Professors who started digging into archives suddenly found their funding cut, their students warned away, and their publishing doors slammed shut. Journalists and filmmakers who dared to expose these horrors were threatened, pushed out, or silenced. Money and politics played their part too. Donors from powerful regions poured billions into Western universities, shaping what was safe to teach and what was better left buried. Governments avoided the topic for fear of upsetting international partners. Media outlets followed the same script, reporting endlessly on certain histories, while treating others as if they never existed. And here's the most chilling reason of all. There are no descendants left to fight for remembrance. The system was designed that way. Castrated men left no families. Enslaved women's children were erased. Whole bloodlines were deliberately cut off. With no one left to demand recognition, this became the perfect crime. Atrocity so thorough that even their memory was almost annihilated. That is why this history feels invisible. It isn't because the evidence doesn't exist. It's because silence was enforced generation after generation. The story of French princesses was never told honestly. Every scandal, every humiliation, every disturbing sexual ritual was carefully hidden by the very people paid to record history. Court historians didn't write the truth, they wrote what the crown demanded. If a princess was inspected like livestock, you won't find it in the official archives. If her wedding night was turned into a public performance, it was scrubbed from the record. If rumors of incest or forced affairs spread through the palace, they were buried as if they had never existed. What remained instead were paintings of perfect innocence, smiling portraits of young women draped in silk, their faces frozen in purity. A carefully crafted illusion. Behind those portraits lay pain and exploitation. But the history books show only beauty, obedience, and grace. The dark reality was erased, replaced with fairy tale imagery designed to protect the monarchy. This wasn't forgetfulness, it was deliberate whitewashing, a centuries-long conspiracy to preserve the illusion of royal perfection. What survives today are fragments, private letters, whispers in diaries, hidden notes by foreign ambassadors, just enough to reveal that the official version of history was a mask. The truth was silenced, erased, and painted over until only the lies remained. The fairy tale of the French princess was always a lie. Behind the crowns and jewels was a nightmare of sexual exploitation, humiliation, and control. These women were treated as political property, their bodies inspected, displayed, and traded in the name of power. And yet, in our classrooms, we were taught only the sanitized version: perfect brides, loyal queens, graceful portraits. A fantasy polished so clean that the suffering disappeared. But history doesn't vanish on its own. It was buried, silenced, whitewashed by those who needed the royal image to remain untouchable. Which means every time we accept the fairy tale without questioning it, we are helping keep the cover-up alive. That's why this story matters. Because the truth only survives if we refuse to let it stay buried. Share this hidden history. Talk about it. Force it back into the light. Because once you know what really happened behind the palace doors, you can never look at royalty the same way again.